So hi everyone, and welcome to our Fireside Chat called Accessibility from the Top Down. I'm Danny Lancaster, Umbraco MVP in Accessibility for Next Digital, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. And when we were putting on this event, we were very keen to explore how accessibility isn't just a sort of delivery level issue, it's a leadership one as well. As the choices made at the top of an organization really help shape culture, priorities, and the ability to create truly inclusive experiences. And I'm very honoured today to be joined by a brilliant group of leaders in Filip, Dennis, Max, and Corey, who have all been navigating this in many different ways across their organisations and industries. So to get us started, I'd love to hear from each of you in a sort of an introduction and also as a personal reflection in a way as well. So I'll ask each of you in turn if you could obviously introduce yourself and your role within your organisation. But I would also love you to try and answer the question of when did accessibility first land on your radar as something that leadership needed to take ownership of, and not just something, as we mentioned before, that was just to delivery teams by any means. So Filip, let's start with yourself, if that's okay.
Sure. Well, my name is Filip. I'm the CTO over at Umbraco. So we build a CMS that a lot of people use to build websites. And talking about accessibility, I mean, our main concern is like the editing experience that lives inside of the back office. So how do we make sure that that's actually accessible for any user who wants to use that? My background is actually a front-end developer myself. So I think that's actually where I first encountered accessibility as something that I needed to learn and figure out. And I mean, that was probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago or something like that, when the first site improve test came back saying my website was not accessible and I had to do something about it for some client I was working on. And since then, I got pretty close to some of the people at Google building the Chrome browser, and I got to learn a lot from them on how to actually implement a lot of these things, and whenever we came up with or they came up with web components and like started talking about all of the issues that came with that in the beginning, and some of which is still not really solved, or at least not known everywhere. So then I grew into management, and it was just second nature. Of course, this is something that we need to take serious. So it was never really something I learned as a manager. I learned it before that it was important. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's just about being a decent person and letting everybody use whatever you're building.
No,
sorry, that was a long introduction.
That was perfect, right on time there. Thank you, Filip. That was excellent. And if I could ask the same to Dennis, I know you've just given a wonderful presentation, but yeah, for those maybe a mystic, could you maybe reintroduce yourself and also tell us when you first noticed is it something being a real priority as a senior level?
Yeah, Dennis Kardys. I'm the head of design at Diagram, an agency in the United States. I'm based in Chicago. I had gone to design school in college. And so it was maybe 2002 or 3 when I started transitioning from being a graphic designer and illustrator into doing stuff for the web. And at first I didn't know any code, so I was building stuff in Photoshop, and I was like, hey, this is great. And then I saw at some point people using it. I'm like, I don't think nobody's using it how I expect them to use it. So I got more interested in like usability and user experience, and then I moved into front-end code. And at this point it was like, maybe like 2007 or 8, but in the US, you had Jeffrey Zeldman and Happy Cog, and they put out a book on web standards, which dealt a lot with accessibility. And then you had in the UK, you had Clear Left and like Andy Budd and Jeremy Keith who were writing about it. And it was like just such a renaissance time for web designers and developers, where that idea of craftsmanship and building stuff that was usable, it's where I finally connected like the craft of building websites with the design of like the experience of interacting with something. And so it just like something dawned on me at that point. And so then I've just tried to bake it into the way that we have our practice and the way that we work. So no matter what your role is, that you're considering it.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Dennis. And Max, pleasure to have you today with us as well. Maybe, yeah, if you could share with yourself to the background, to everyone as well around your background, that'd be brilliant.
Sure, thanks, Danny. I am Max Marulli. I'm inclusive design lead for the NHS. So, I mean, what that means is that I sit within the Transformation Directorate, which houses all of the great user-centered design teams and everybody else who make the digital products for the arm of the NHS. And I exist basically as a point of contact within digital teams across trusts and integrated care boards and centrally to give advice and leadership and education to teams on how to design inclusively in order to mitigate clinical risk, but ultimately to reduce the digital divide for people seeking healthcare and equity in healthcare. Well, when did I start this stuff? I suppose I started because I was one of the sort of like evil problems to start with. I think many people could probably relate to that because, you know, usually, you know, you start doing things and then realize the further you go along that they're not very accessible and that it's a huge problem. And I think in a weird sort of way, it came onto my radar because I was designing things for a brand management agency maybe 15 years ago in supermarkets, so aisle signs in the middles of supermarkets, and we moved them from the ends of supermarket aisles into the middle of supermarket aisles because it encouraged people, and made the font smaller because it encouraged people to go down aisles so they would see products because they couldn't see what was in the aisle because they needed to see the sign closer. And I was thinking about, and I was like, this is fairly evil, and this is making what should be accessible things inaccessible to people, and then that obviously led me on to digital accessibility and all of these good things that come from it. So yes, went from a place of bad stuff to hopefully a place of good stuff and care.
Oh, that's it's how we all start, isn't it, Max? Exactly as you said, though. If you don't know what you don't know, and as soon as you do realize the truth of it all, you quickly change your practices. So yeah, pleasure to have you here. And last but not least, Corey, also a pleasure to have you here. If you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself and when accessibility first came onto your radar as well.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me on this. My name is Corey Vilhauer. I am Director of Strategy at Blend Interactive, which is a web shop here in the United States. We essentially, like my area of expertise is the strategic design part of things, but my experience with accessibility actually began with my first job out of college, which was as a relay operator for CSD Relay in the United States here, which essentially provides TTY services for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. It was an experience that, while it had its ups and downs, obviously, it kind of opened my eyes of like a different, you know, the idea that we kind of go through life with, you know, our own perspective, and hey, guess what? There's other perspectives out there. What a wild concept. This it kind of helped me rethink everything as I was moving into the web of creating things that everybody can, you know, understand. And I didn't realize, you know, at the time that there was like a term for it. You know, I didn't call it accessibility. It was just like, oh, I'm making, you know, where I'm helping people who can't hear very well understand what somebody's talking about on the phone. When I got into sort of self-publishing, it's like, oh, I put an image on here and somebody complained they don't know what the image is. I guess I probably should give some sort of description for that. All these little things that didn't really have a name, or I didn't know the name, is kind of where where I ended up starting with accessibility.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. So that was a great grounding in, you know, why accessibility obviously matters so much to each of you. So I'd like us to quickly go into the more gritty stuff then and speak about how those sorts of beliefs get translated into action, right? So if we wouldn't mind, maybe Filip, starting with yourself, as many people in our wonderful community know a lot about you already. So I think they would be also quite keen alongside myself to know how accessibility is reflected in maybe your strategy or your decision making as sort of a CTO of Umbraco, of course.
For sure. I mean, for us, accessibility is kind of a given, right? It's something that we need to do. I mean, as I said before, it's something that we do because we think it's the right thing to do. But of course, I think if you wanted to build the business case, it was pretty easy as well. I mean, think about how much time we spend optimizing for browsers that 1% of the users actually use, or something like that. Like that's ridiculous when you think about how many people could benefit from accessibility work. So in our end, I think our strategy on accessibility basically comes down to saying like this is a part of the platform. This is a part of the product, is that it's accessible. So if it's not, then I mean, whenever we find bugs, of course there's bugs, there's something that we do, and we treat it exactly like that. We treat it as a bug. We put it on the bug list, and we fix it, and then we ship an update with the fix in it, even if it's just an accessibility bug, and that's the whole point. And I think also, like, if you want to talk from a business perspective as well, I think that's also kind of the secret sauce, because a lot of people, there's obviously a lot of talk around compliance and AA or AAA and which standard and all of that stuff. And my approach to that is to say that we are compliant, and if there's anything that I mean, whenever there is something, we treat it as a bug, and that's typically something that people can actually relate to, because they know that it's never going to be bug free. There's always going to be a thing here and there, and that means that I don't need to verify every release before I can release it, because I mean, we have a great community of people in this call and everywhere and all over the world that helps us identify bugs and sometimes even helps us fix them, right? So that's pretty good. And yeah, then it's difficult when you do bigger changes, and then you have to proactively get some work done to check how you're doing, and so you get somewhere to get those things fixed. I mean, most of you will, or at least some of you will know that we recently did a technical change in the back office where we changed a lot of the technology behind it, and I mean, we're about to launch a new testing or verification efforts into that, so we can make sure that all of that actually is still compliant, and if it's not, then get it fixed.
Yeah, it's been brilliant now, especially seeing the journey that Umbraco obviously have been on over the last few years around accessibility. And yeah, I love that idea that you said there, Filip, around it. It needs the same level of sort of weight and responsibility on not just descoping it because it's just an accessibility issue, right? It needs to be treated the same sort of priority as anything else. So I think, yeah, wonderful to hear that, definitely. And we might ask maybe Corey as well, being obviously director of strategy, I'd be keen to get sort of your insights as well, and love to know about that, about how it reflects the strategy and decision making. But I would also like to know if you've got any maybe effective mechanisms for accountability. How do you think about things like reviews, dashboards, policies, anything like that? Quite a long question there for you, Corey, but yeah, just any insights on anything like that would be brilliant.
Yeah, what I think run into the most when it comes to accessibility sort of in the early stages before we're diving into design, before we're diving into front end is really just allowances for how much time is going to be put toward it. And I think that's we'll talk about this when we talk about pushbacks later, but what we've found really successful in this is helping people understand that I think that let me take a little jump to the side here. I think when we wrote the term inclusive, when we talk about inclusive design, when we talk about inclusivity when it comes to accessibility, it's an interesting term to use, because inclusivity makes it feel as though there's a larger group that's accepting in people from the outside, like, oh, come in here, it's okay, we've got you, we're going to bring you into our fold. When in reality, and this is kind of the point when accessibility really landed for me as a web issue. In reality, like, every single person is at some time or will be at some time in a situation where they would be considered disabled according to the accessibility rules, and it's almost as if we need to sort of shift away from the idea of like inclusivity and more towards just like the universal rule of the web is that everyone is going to run into this. Everybody's going to, whether it's temporary, whether it's sort of like a situational, whether it's, something that's based on low connection speed, whether it's sort of a poverty issue. There are so many things that roll into accessibility. And we found that explaining it in that way helps leadership with our clients understand this isn't like a thing that we're doing to help people who can't see very well. This thing we're doing to help people who want to buy a product. That's it. The end. The people who want to engage with us for our services. And when you push it in that direction, it makes it a lot easier for people to say, okay, we do need to put time toward this at the start. We do need to account for this when we're developing a tech plan or when we're developing a design.
It's such an important aspect, isn't it? They just, unless we're talking about the wider picture and something that I found from my experience as well when speaking to clients and workshops and things like that is that there's several people in the audience who just simply won't get it unless it's applicable to them, right? So unless they've been in that experience or somebody in their close family. So just to highlight actually about the stages and when it could impact you as well. Like you said, bringing in the temporary in the situational goes a long way as well towards raising that baseline way of awareness as well, doesn't it, Corey? So thank you for that.
Can I jump in real quick? I think
please.
one of the things, so before I joined Umbraco, I was on the agency side as well, so like building lots of different websites. And what we used to do was not not make this anything optional. Like don't split it out into details, just like you don't split writing tests or anything else into details on an invoice or on your proposal or whatever. Like just make it part of building the feature that of course it's accessible and of course there's tests and of course it works. And that's very much how we do it. And then of course they'll always say, but this other guy can make it cheaper. And then you tell them all the reasons why your offering is still better, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Philip. I think that's really essential to really getting it across to how we actually view accessibility as an organization, right, in the first place. And I think again, bringing in multiple different departments and areas is essential to that as well. So I'll ask this a little bit more open, I guess, this next part to it. But has anyone had any experience working with other departments in terms of maybe procurement teams or HR teams or marketing, anything like that? Maybe something away from your typical delivery teams, and how have you managed to manage that relationship?
I mean, I guess depending on both internally and then with other organizations we worked with, there's usually a much wider stakeholder group than whoever is participating in the website redesign or development project for new stuff that we're doing. And I think it still comes down to some of the themes, which is not making it optional, having it baked in, and then also not framing accessibility as an obstacle to whatever job those different departments are trying to get done. So if somebody needs to come time to market more quickly with some new content, being able to find ways to layer in accessibility work to make sure that when it goes out the door, it's more accessible than it would have been, rather than having like an accessibility project have to precede getting anything done for different units who are just trying to they have their own goals and responsibility, and accessibility is probably not top of mind for them.
I mean, in the NHS, accessibility is sort of baked into comms in such a general way that it's second nature, I suppose, because all of the communication we do is backed up by alt formatting, and the way in which you communicate with people about health is so important because it produces such great clinical risk if it's not done right. So I think that in that sense, the majority of the things that we do centrally, even if they don't touch on the classic digital sphere of things, end up having to have accessibility as such a key thing right at the center of them.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that idea about bringing what you both said there, really, isn't it? About bringing, it's like I said, it's a central part that people then, whether it's a principle, whether it's the way, an ethos within the organization, it needs to make sure it's got something that brings people on that similar mission, even if it's different priorities along the way for it, definitely. And I think all this leads us quite nicely into turning that idea around strategy into, practice almost. And I think the reality, unfortunately, is that even with executive buy-in, a lot of time, there's always still going to be challenges, right? So, Corey, you mentioned this earlier about something you'd be quite keen to share with us. So I'd love to get your insights first on what have been some of the biggest challenges maybe you faced in trying to prioritize accessibility and how you sort of managed that along the way.
The biggest challenge that we run into is time. And time comes in really two forms in this sense. There's the idea that we can we can build something that's accessible, but our clients need to have somebody who can spend time maintaining that accessibility. And that's usually one of the biggest struggles. You know, you go back and look at a site that we'd worked on 6 months ago, and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that they've had somebody who has been taking the time to make sure that the heading levels are correct, and taking the time to make sure that that editorial accessibility is still top of mind. And the other part of that is kind of related, which is oftentimes when we're looking at it, I think Dennis, you talked about this both in your talking just now, the idea that a lot of clients want to really quickly turn some content out, or they really want to turn a new web feature out. And it isn't a matter of do we like they're willing to pay for the accessibility side of things. They just aren't willing to give time for it to be done. They need something turned so quickly that they'll just like, we got to get this out right now. We'll go test this ourselves. We're going to get this out right now. And what you end up with in those situations is you end up with this sort of stacked pile of cruft that you then have to go back, and it takes even longer to adjust it because now you have different styles everywhere across the site. You've got different areas where accessibility is at different levels everywhere. And so that's really the biggest pushback I think we find is everyone will give lip service that like, yes, accessibility is what we want, but it's that time as the time element of it that people really get hung up on.
Yeah, it's such a big part, isn't it? It's trying to get the appropriate time to do these things. And have you got any tips for the people listening around how you've been able to navigate that before, Corey, maybe in those challenging conversations?
I mean, the tip is not a real tip because it unfortunately is not like, you can say it as many times as you want, but it might not always there. You just got to start earlier. Everything needs to start earlier. You have to know that things take time and you have to give it time to do it. And unfortunately, I think the biggest tip that we run into uh, is when you're done with the first part of a project to remind everyone for the second part of a project, these are the things that didn't work so well because we didn't give it time. And we'd like to spend some more time on this. So let's start talking about it earlier. Like move it earlier in the discussion process so that at least somebody's aware of it going forward.
Such a important aspect, isn't it? And Dennis, it's something you spoke around in your talk, wasn't it, around this idea about shifting left? So yeah, I'd love to get your input as well. You've already mentioned and shared some of the challenges you've experienced, but how do you find you've managed to convince others along the way to do accessibility for the right reasons, I guess?
Well, from the pain of seeing what happens when the testing happens at the end. So you've done design and everyone approves it, and then you've done development and it's like, great, it's working as expected. And then QA comes in and ruins everybody's dreams. And then you go back to the client and say like, that color, we need to change it. And we need more time now to fix these issues that are inherent in the code because we tested with another device. That's an unexpected delay. And whether you're charging for it or not, that's, to Corey's point, that's where does that time come from? Because we weren't anticipating it. So by shifting everything left and having QA involved from the very beginning to rip things to shreds at every stage of the way, and also to tell the client like, hey, we're looking at this stuff and we don't think these colors are going to work before we start the project because, the brand, I remember, it might have been you, Danny, but like somebody was saying like, you're working with a brand agency and then they bring in all these colors and they're not usable. So identifying that before you even start and not, 4 weeks into the process of building stuff, you're like, oh, by the way, like we might need to change some stuff. So just ruin everyone's dreams as early as possible by involving QA every step of the way.
I love
I've got to say,
I love the I was just about to say, I love the ruining people's dreams.
As a past QA, I must say that is sort of bread and butter of the job. You know what I mean? You're out there to be destructive and to ruin those dreams, aren't you, Dennis? So I really resonate with that.
It's painful in the moment, but then ultimately everybody's way happier that you addressed those things early on. So
It's a
like-
lot. It's a lot less painful than when they get further down and you say, "Listen, you have like 1,500 accessibility errors, and almost all of them are because you have pink on green. You know, why why is your contrast so awful?"
Let me give that to the client is my advice on that. Yeah. No, it really important stuff. It's about managing those conversations, and if it's whether you're working with another agency or or the client themselves, like as you said there, you really need to make sure that you raise this earlier with them and shift the entire process to the left and make sure you split that responsibility. Such a big part, isn't it? Not making sure that accessibility is just one person's responsibility. It needs to be from every part, isn't it? So my next question then I found has always been quite an interesting one for leaders, as so much of this work relies not just on the systems, of course, but on people, right, as well. So if we can, let's talk a little bit about culture then. So Max, perfect person to have for this part, and about what you spoke around earlier as well, and building on that, I'd be keen to ask you, how do you support and empower the many teams you've got within the NHS to take ownership of accessibility as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, first caveat is that it's not easy. I think anybody that leads in any way can attest to the fact that culture is possibly the most difficult thing to not only embed, but to just keep the embers of it alive. There's an enormous amount of trust involved in it, having and listening to people that either have a deep knowledge of accessibility or have a hunger to learn more about. And I think that those two types of people are where you can begin to create some sort of culture and help to drive it forward. It's really challenging in an organization as big as the NHS. We have 1.6 million staff. Obviously they're not all building digital things, but digital accessibility needs to be part of everybody's role because, as I said, it's so important to factors like clinical risk and health equity. So everybody needs some sort of understanding of what these things mean, even if it's alt text or blowing some sort of prescription information up to 16, 18 point or something for someone, right down to coding something correctly. I think for me, in the last year, embedding a culture here has just finally begun to bear fruit, I suppose. It's taken about a year to really get the people that are interested in digital accessibility in the same room and empower them on teams to start making, smart decisions and to communicate those things effectively up. Because I think that as much as it is the job of leaders to try and influence accessibility, I think that there has to be people on teams that care. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of this stuff becoming a backlog ticket that sits somewhere. And when you're working at pace on teams, and as you said before, things aren't shifted left, you end up down the road having done accessibility testing and it's still a concern, but then a lot of the skill has left the team because of the way Agile works, that iteration is done, but people start to drop off and capacity is not there anymore, which is also money and time. So yeah, I can only attest to the fact that it's difficult, but I've found successes in involving people and making a community and trying to have regular catch-ups and do things in person, and a lot of the stuff that used to happen, I suppose, when we were in the office before COVID became a thing and people were so remote.
Yeah, I think that's such a big part, though, isn't it? About taking those people who are particularly interested and then take them down that journey to becoming accessibility champions, advocates within the organisation, so that you're not the sole voice, right? The more people talking about it, the better.
Always tend to steer clear of champion, though. It sounds very government, doesn't it? It sounds like an initiative of some sort.
Yeah, a bit of a culty term, but yeah, no, it's the idea around making sure that they're recognised for their work, though, isn't it, right, Max? So thank you very much. And Filip as well, the idea around, I guess it's quite interesting, your role and your industry in a way, because you've got quite a few different ideas around community, right? You've got your internal people within Umbraco, you've got the way you handle partners with gold partners and things like that, and then you've got obviously the wider community and the engagement there. So how have you found being able to sort of think about culture within those multiple different communities?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Max that culture is it's difficult to manage, and a lot of times it just happens. And I think, I mean, in all humility, I think a lot of what makes Umbraco looks great is random chance and some good people in the community. I mean, that's hard to replicate, I know, but I mean, I don't feel like I can take the credit for any of that. I mean, there's a lot of great people who were really passionate about accessibility and really made us aware, you know, before I joined Umbraco even, that this was something to take seriously. And I think then we've nurtured it. We've I mean, we have these community teams that are like where people are a little bit more committed to be part of as a volunteer of a team that works on a specific area of Umbraco. And we there was an accessibility team that was formed, and we helped them along the way and gave them a few resources and stuff. But a lot of the work came out of the good hearts of good people, and I mean, that's a very fortunate position to be in. I think what we have done, I mean, I think as much as you can say about all of the static analyzers of code, you know, the accessibility audit in Lighthouse and all of that stuff, the fact of some kind of gamification is always great for engineers, right? Like they want their 100% score with a green circle around it, just like they want for performance. And I think that thing is probably overlooked. And I mean, it's far from perfect, and it doesn't cover. There's a lot of stuff it doesn't cover, but just putting it in the forefront, like putting it next to performance, putting it next to things that all engineers knows is important. I think that makes a difference. And you know, then talking about it and praising the developers who's good at it, and just as much as we praise those who write super performant code or do a great architecture, right? I think that's what we can do, like as culture bearers or creators or managers or whatever we call it.
No, fantastic. But yeah, it's about looking at ways that innovative ways that you can sort of get people doing it, even if it's not necessarily for the right reason. As long as they're doing it, that's often the important part to some of these things, isn't it? So thank you very much. Conscious of time, so bringing us towards a close, I'd love to hear what we think might be next. So if we could start with Dennis. What are your aspirations for accessibility within your organization and the wider, you know, picture, I suppose, for a better choice of words? And what role do you think leadership might play or needs to play for that to happen?
Good question. That's a challenging one. I think that in terms of like aspirations, obviously it's to be able to, we looked at the stats all throughout the day of how many homepages across the web are inaccessible. And so I think it's probably amplifying the impact that we have as teams. And it may be finding ways not to have AI do things like generate all the alt text, which we know could be problematic, but to find ways to enable the productivity so that some of those things that are creating obstacles like time or cost, that we can do in a responsible manner, but with more outreaching impact on those things. So just finding ways to do that, as well as to just reinforce the nature. And I like what Corey said about not making it seem like this inclusive club, but really reframing accessibility as a basic tenet of universal design, which is getting people to experience and purchase your products or experience your services more. So I think if we can see a change, a more significant change in accessibility across the web, then we've done our job well. And there has not been, over the many years they have the Web AIM 1 million, there has not been significant change in any of those numbers over the course of many years.
Yeah, no, I think that's yeah, really important, like you said as well. It's this idea around just, I guess, taking ownership to a degree, right? But it's really about making sure that people are aware for it as well. So yeah, thank you very much. And you know, Max, I guess from a very different audience, you know, being very public sector, what would be a similar question? What's your hopes for the next years, and how do you think we can take part?
I love being described as very public sector. Thanks for that.
Very, that's how it's Max, the public sector. Really,
he's so public sector. I honestly, it's embedding better, arming with better tools. You know, tools are ever changing, and unless there's somebody or a group of people that's continuously exonerate, you know, continuously extolling the what do you call it, the virtue of accessibility and showing teams how to use things, people are just going to continue to work in silos, and you'll have like silos of excellence. And I suppose that's where community comes in again, of getting people to share stuff between each other. You know, it'd be lovely to have accessibility specialists on every team, and for it to be something that's sort of hard coded into the way that we set teams up. But equally, it would be nice for a specialist to not have to be a thing within an individual team. It would be nice that it's part of something that everybody does. I also think that colleagues like delivery managers and product owners have such an enormous part to play in making sure that these things are done well. And quite often, when you're talking about agile teams that build digital things, a lot of the time it's people that build code, develop code, and user-centered design teams. You know, and they're the people that are seen as being responsible for the thing. But actually, if you don't build the thing, you know, accessibility into a product timeline, it never ends up getting done meaningfully. And it relies on those people alone without it being something that's managed from the top. So, yeah, I think better tools and asking the right questions of the people that own the products and have the reins, I think, is where I'm looking to go.
No, yeah, go that way, Max. Yeah, I think that's excellent. Yeah, it'd be nice
In a very
to have
public
lot more
sector
people.
way.
In a very, said like a true diplomat. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and also thank you, Dennis, as well. We got nearly through the end of this chat without anyone mentioning AI, but you managed to sneak it in there at the end there. So, but yeah, no, 100% using it in a, not just generating all the old text, right? Let's use it in a meaningful way that we can influence it as well. So, bear in mind we've got 2 minutes left or so. So I'd just like to ask each of you if you could answer in, 1-2 sentences, maybe putting you on the spot a little bit. But if you had one message for other leaders who are just beginning maybe to take accessibility seriously, maybe they've tuned in today and we've inspired them on the back of this, what would you like to say to them? So if we can, I will start with Corey. Would you like to go first?
Yes, I get to go first. I think it's I think you need to hire for empathy is maybe one of the things that's really important when it comes to this. You have to hire people who don't see this as a line item. They see it as this is just part of the whole. I mean, that's I think the what we try to do, and I think what all of us probably on this call try to do when we're in situations where we're looking for people to come in and affect change beyond just like skills. You need empathy to be able to understand that this stuff works.
Really, yeah, empathy and lived experience, right? Bringing as many people into the workplace with a range of backgrounds is essential, definitely. And Dennis, I'll pass over to you if that's okay. Same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the core, design in any form, the purpose of it is to leave things in a better state than they were when they started. So for leaders to not be intimidated by the volumes of guidelines and rules there are about how to make something accessible and chip away at it, start with something small. And to the nature of, speaking towards empathy, a video of somebody using your website who's struggling speaks 1,000 words. So find opportunities to connect with people with a diverse range of abilities and expose your team and your clients to firsthand experiences of people so they can relate to it and then become invested in it.
Oh, yeah, well, no, yeah, it's bringing those things firsthand, practical, lived examples of them, right, to the people who can make those decisions is essential. Thank you, Dennis. And Max, how about yourself? How do you think? What's one message you give to other leaders?
I would say it's about everyone. You know, it's not about building specifically for people with lived experience of disability, because otherwise you get into that hot water where people are like, oh, they're only X% of the user base of, that is a trope that we've all heard many times. And I think making people understand that if you design for the edges, you get the center for free. you get great frictionless services when you design for people with lived experience of disability and inequality in any way. So that would be my one.
That'll stay with me. That, yeah, type of the NGs, the census for free, then brilliant stuff. And Filip, of course, how about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think the three gentlemen said it very nicely. I think for me, the big thing is not thinking of this as something optional that you get to choose whether you want to do or not. And then, I mean, if your customers or your clients or however, you know, they keep that mindset, then, I mean, you can always calculate some kind of number that is nice to show them what missed potential they're doing or something like that. I think in most cases the business case is actually quite straightforward to do. If like how much do you want to encourage, like how do you really want to build for just the 80% that don't need this right now, and some of them might need it tomorrow, right? I think if you want to build the business case, you can, but I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to doing the right thing, I think.
Definitely so, yeah. And I think the business case, as you said, it really does write itself for so many different organizations if you bring in the so many different pillars to accessibility, definitely. But that is our time today. So I just wanted to wish you all thank you so much to say for all your time. To Filip, Dennis, Max, and Corey for all of your insights, your stories, and of course your honesty today is muchly appreciated. And hopefully the session has sparked some ideas on how leadership can not only support, but actually truly drive accessibility forwards within your own organizations. So thank you to everyone for watching. I will now hand back over to Mike.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you all so much for that. That was absolutely brilliant conversation. It's always really useful, I find, to hear different perspectives, especially from different levels in a business. I mean, often we hear from sort of designers, developers, UX, QA, and hearing all of your insights is incredibly valuable. So thank you all very much for your time and your very brilliant insight. Thank you also. That was the last session for today. We are finishing up. So I would just like to say, first off, let me just get my screen shared again. Got a few more slides, not many. I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of you who have joined us here today. Without you attending, we wouldn't put this on. So you're the reason why we do this. So thank you. Secondly, I'd like to thank everyone who's been involved with organizing. This isn't a small effort to put this together. We left it very late this year and managed to bring this together in about 2 months. So thank you all very, very much to Amy, Blake, Danny, Harry, Jeremiah, Johnny, Matt, and Rachel. Thank you all so much for your time. It's made doing this very, very fun, and I hope everyone's got a lot out of it. So yeah, that is very much the end. So thank you, and obviously thank you to our sponsors as well.